Let's see if we get this thing running somehow. All right, Patrick, can you give me a thumbs up if you see my screen? Do you see my screen?
Perfect. That.
Perfect. All right. So, welcome to lecture 10 of my classical Greek introductory course. Today, we are introduced to two new verbal moods. So far, we have had the indicative and the imperative moods. And now we are also going to learn the present subjunctive and optative moods, both in the active and the medial passive voice. Further, we are having a closer look at the inflection of the interrogative pronoun tis, as well as at its unaccented counterpart, the indefinite pronoun tis. You find both of these paradigms on page 97, section 724 in the Cambridge Grammar of Classical Greek. Then we are also going to continue our overview of third declension nouns. Today we are looking at the nouns of this declension with stems ending in a nasal consonant, as well as the ones ending with liquids, which are lamba and rho. We are also including some adjectives with stems ending in an N sound in our overview. And finally, we end with a short introduction to the use of the optative and the subjunctive in classical Greek. But let's begin with the subjunctive. In Greek, or in classical Greek, we can usually recognize a verb form in the subjunctive mood through a lengthened thematic vowel, which falls between the stem and the person ending when the verb is in the subjunctive mood. So for example, the first person singular present subjunctive active of our paradigmatic verb, paideuo, is also paideuo, since in the first person singular there are no visible thematic vowels in the active voice. But if we look at the corresponding first person plural forms, we can notice the difference. Since here the indicative form paideuo men has a short thematic vowel, and this vowel is lengthened in the subjunctive, so that it becomes paideuo men in the first person plural present subjunctive active. And also in the other persons and numbers, except for the first person singular, the lengthening of the thematic vowel of the person ending is clearly detectable, as we may note when we overview the full paradigm of the present subjunctive active. So here we have it. We have here paideuo in the first person singular, paideues in the second person singular. So here the ace of the present indicative active ending has been lengthened to es. And there is a iota subscript under the ending as well. And then we have paideue in the third person singular with a similar lengthening in the person ending. And in the plural, we have paideuomen in the first person plural, paideuete in the second person plural, and paideuosin in the third person plural. So we can see here that the plural forms all receive a long version of the thematic vowel sounds, e or o between the stem and the ending. But let us now move on directly to the paradigm for the present subjunctive medial passive. Here, the lengthening of the thematic vowel may be detected also in the first person singular, while the second person singular form is the odd one out, as it is in fact identical with the corresponding medial passive indicative form, which we have learned before. And actually also with the third person singular present subjunctive active form, which we just looked at. And this may of course cause some confusion, but be that as it may, here we have, anyway, if we look at full paradigm, paideu omai in the first person singular, paideu e in the second person singular, paideu etai with a clearly recognizable long thematic e sound in the third person singular. Then in the plural we have paideu ometa with a long o sound in the first person plural, paideu este in the second person plural, and paideu ontai in the third person plural. So here all the plural forms again have a clearly recognizable long thematic vowel. And this is what you should bear in mind about subjunctive forms more generally as well. That is, that they can usually be recognized from the long thematic vowel falling between the stem and the ending of the verb. Of course, it would be good if you could memorize these two paradigms as well. Fine, let us turn directly to the present optative then. How can an optative be recognized? In the present optative forms, as well as in the future and perfect optative forms, by the way, but these later we will learn later. But anyway, there is usually a specific infix or suffix, however you like, which makes these forms easily recognizable. And this infix is the diphthong oi, which falls between the stem and the ending of the verb when the verb is an optative. As for instance, in the example paideu oimi, which you can see on the screen. And the endings in turn are not completely identical with the corresponding indicative forms. But the best way to begin to come to terms with the specific optative forms is to overview their paradigms. So here we have to begin with the present optative active, which has paideu oimi in the first person singular, paideu ois in the second person singular, paideu oi in the third person singular, and in the plural we have paideu oimen in the first person plural, paideu oitte in the second person plural, and in the third person plural we have paideu oien. In all of these forms, as we can see, the optative oi infix is clearly recognizable. And as we will see in what follows, the same pattern is in place in the medial passive forms as well. Here, in the present medial passive optative, we have paideu oime in the first person singular, then paideu oio in the second person singular, paideu oitto in the third person singular, and in the plural we have paideu oimetha in the first person plural, paideu oiste in the second person plural, and paideu ointo in the third person plural. Okay, regarding the future forms of the subjunctive and the optative, the rule is as simple as can be when it comes to the subjunctive, since they do not exist. Future optative forms do exist, however, and here the basic rule of formation is again that the futural sigma infix is placed between the stem and the ending. which in this case means that the sigma falls between the stem and the optative oi infix and the actual ending. Hence, for example, the first person singular future optative active form is paidei soimi, and the second person singular is paideu sois, and so on. Fine. Let us turn to the next topic then, which are the interrogative and indefinite pronouns tis, tis. The first of these, that is tis in the meaning of who or what, is the accented one. And the accent on this pronoun is always acute, except for the alternative forms you can see here in the genitive and dative singular. These in turn take a circumflex accent and are in fact formally identical with the definite article in the same case and gender. Further, as you can see, the neuter gender has its own forms, while the masculine and the feminine ones are shared. So this is how this pronoun is inflected. In the masculine and feminine, in the singular, we have tis in the nominative, tinos or tu. In the genitive, tini. In the dative, or to. And in the accusative, we have tina. Then in the neuter, we have ti, tinos or tu, tini or to, and ti. And in the plural, masculine and feminine, we have tines in the nominative, tinon in the genitive, tisin in the dative, and tinas in the accusative. And in the neuter, tina, tinon, tisin, and tina. Okay, next we have then tis in the meaning of someone or something. These forms are identical with interrogative pronouns, as you can see, except that they lack an accent. But just look at the forms for a while and try to etch them into your mind as well as you can. In chapter 9 of our textbook, you will encounter both the interrogative and the indefinite variant of tis. And you will then understand how they function in context. But this atta, this variant form, atta, is actually does not exist in the interrogative version of this pronoun. But actually, I think it's not a very common form. At least I can't remember that I've encountered it that often. So tina is definitely the more common one in the neuter plural. Fine. Next, we return to declinations of nouns. What we have on our program today are the third declension nouns with stems ending in nasals. The nouns in this category all have a stem ending in ny, and most commonly the nominative singular forms end in ny as well. However, as is usual when it comes to third declension nouns, we have to look at the other cases to find the stem. But let us go through our example here, which is the noun daimon, meaning deity or demon. So here we have in the singular daimon, in the nominative daimonos, in the genitive daimoni, in the dative daimona, in the accusative, and in the vocative we have daimon. with a shortened final vowel and a compensatory lengthening of the preceding diphthong, because the accent is on the first syllable. And in the plural, we have daimones in the nominative, daimonon in the genitive, daimosin in the dative, daimonas in the accusative, and daimones again in the vocative. Fine. Moving on to the third declension, nouns with stems ending in liquids then. In this category, we have two different examples. In the first one, which we see here on the screen, which is hair, meaning hand, the stem is almost the same in all numbers and cases. So here we have in the singular hair in the nominative, heiros in the genitive, heiri in the dative, heira in the accusative, and heir in the vocative. And in the plural, we have heires in the nominative, heiron in the genitive, then hersin with the disappearance of the iota from the stem in the dative, heiras in the accusative, and heires in the vocative. Fine. Next example is again of a third declension noun with a stem ending with the liquid consonant ro. But here we actually have two different stems in different numbers and cases. That is, we have an alternation between the stems aner and andr. But let us go through the whole paradigm. In the singular, we have here aner in the nominative, andra, which is the first word in the Odyssey, in the accusative, and andros in the genitive, andri in the dative, and then aner in the vocative. And in the plural, we have andres in the nominative, andron in the genitive, andrasin in the dative, andras in the accusative, and andres in the vocative. So we can detect here the original stem aner in the vocative singular, and this stem has then been lengthened to aner in the nominative singular due to the loss of an original sigma, which we do not need to consider further, however. All the same, the other numbers and cases are then formed from the alternative stem andre. Okay. One had disappeared here. I had another. Let's see if I find it somewhere else. No. Well, you just have to do without the PowerPoint then. But other examples of third declension nouns anyway, with stems ending in ro and which alternate between two different stems include tygater, tygatros, meaning daughter, meter, metros, meaning mother, and pater, patros, which means father. Okay, let us turn to the adjectives we have on our program today then. These all have a stem which end in ny. And the first of these is of the two ending type, which, as we remember, means that the forms are identical in the masculine and the feminine, while the neuter one has an own form. But what's special with this paradigm when compared to others we've had so far is that actually all forms follow the third declension. So both the masculine and the feminine and the neuter adjectives are here inflected according to the third declension, and that's also why the genitive and dative singular forms are shared, as well as the vocative forms, even though they're given separately here. But we can say that the vocative forms, both in the in the singular, they are shared as well. So, well, there's nothing else there, which I think is especially noteworthy. But the second adjective that we have, the paradigm 4 here is melas, melaina, mela. This means black or dark, but more usually black, I would say. You can find this paradigm on page 74, section 523 in the Cambridge Grammar. And this adjective is of the three-ending type. So that means that it has the masculine and neutral forms in common. No, the masculine and neutral forms are separate. But the masculine and neutral forms both follow the third declension, while the feminine forms follows the first declension. Is there something especially noteworthy here? No, not really. So I would suggest that maybe if you would try to memorize one or two paradigms for adjectives, that would be good. So we've had like, you don't have to memorize them all, but we had quite a lot of them. But one or two can be good. And this, maybe remember that we had like adjectives of that are of three-ending type, in which some of the forms follow the first and other forms follow the second declension, and then we have also this where some of the forms follow the first declension, the feminine ones, and then the masculine and neutral ones follow the third declension. So maybe one of each of these would be good to memorize. But that's it for today when it comes to nouns and adjectives. In what follows, we turn to the use of the new verbal moods we have learned today, which are the optative and the subjunctive. We begin with how the subjunctive is used in the main clause. When it comes to moods, we have thus far mainly been dealing with the indicative, and this is usually used to state something factual, as we remember. The subjunctive, when it's used in the main clause, on the other hand, is mainly employed for the purpose of expressing some form of exhortation or command. Alternatively, questions or deliberations. So, paidevo, for instance, which we remember is formally identical in the present indicative active and in the present subjunctive active, can, if it is a subjunctive, mean either I shall educate or I should educate. In the first case, when the subjunctive is used to express a command, it is called a hortatory subjunctive. So, for example, the first person active subjunctive plural form diokome, if it occurs in a main clause, can be used to state the command, let us pursue. In fact, hortatory subjunctives are most common in the first person plural. Hortatory subjunctives can also be negated, in which case the negation used is me. However, negated hortatory subjunctives, so-called prohibitory subjunctives, only occur in the aorist tense, which we haven't had yet. So we will have to postpone looking at examples of these. Fine. But if diokomen would be a deliberative subjunctive, its meaning would be shall we pursue? Or another example would be the phrase ti legomen, the meaning of which would be what should we say? The deliberative subjunctive is also most common in the first person, either in the singular or in the plural. Okay. Next, we have an example of an use of the subjunctive, which is quite common. And this is the use of the subjunctive in final clauses. That is, in subordinate clauses, giving expression to purpose or intention. In classical Greek, final clauses are introduced with the conjunctions hina, hopos, or hos, which translate as in order to or to. As an example of the subjunctive used in final clauses, we have here the sentence ho strategos baditsei hina pere pharmakon, which could be translated as the general goes to bring medicine. The final clauses are negated with me, by the way, and if we remember from the last lecture, another way of expressing finality in classical Greek is by using a future participle. Finally, the conjunction hopos can also be used together with future indicative to express purpose, which can be a good thing to remember. So, how do we use the optative then? Here we can again begin by looking at the uses in main clauses. In the main clause, the optative is mainly used to express a wish, and often, but not always, together with the participle eite, which should not be translated. And these kind of optatives can also be negated with me. An example of an optative of wish would be the phrase eite kalos prattois, which could be translated as I hope you do well. Moreover, the optative in the main clause can also be used to express a potential happening or action, and also to express rhetorical questions, that is, questions to which an answer is not anticipated. But these we will encounter examples of later. How about the optative in subordinate clauses? Well, actually, there are a number of different uses for both the subjunctive and the optative in subordinate clauses. I'm even tempted to say that there are an endless amount of them. But one use of the optative in subordinate clauses is the so-called oblique optative. The oblique optative occurs when, under certain preconditions, there is an optative in the subordinate clause standing instead of an indicative or a subjunctive. The precondition which has to be fulfilled for the oblique optative to be used is that the predicate of the main clause is a verb in a past tense. So far, we have only learned the imperfect of past tenses. So let us look at an example with a verb in the imperfect in the main clause. The example we have is hoi strateiotai elegon hoti pisteu oien Leonida. This could be translated as the soldiers said that they trust Leonidas. So here the third person plural present active optative form pisteu oien is used instead of the corresponding indicative form pisteu uusin, since the predicate in the main clause is elegon. And this elegon is in the past tense. It is an imperfect. So this would be an example of an optativus obliquus. The oblique optative is mainly used in final clauses and in object clauses, by the way. And it is a common feature of classical Greek. In later Greek, however, the optativus obliquus, along with other uses of optatives in subordinate clauses, become less and less common. And in the New Testament, they are already almost non-existent. And of course, optative forms finally disappear altogether as well, but in the classical Greek language, they are common, as I said. And actually, in the New Testament, there's quite a few. I checked this myself. I read the Gospel of John, I think, and the Gospel of Matthew, and counted the optatives there. So I could find many examples of optatives in main clauses, but I don't remember encountering any optatives in the subordinate clause. So they disappear first from the subordinate clauses, and then slowly they disappear altogether from Greek. But that's not part of this course anymore, but just an historical meander, if you like. I know that there was quite a lot of content in this lecture, so it may take a while for it to sink in, but you have time to go through it after the next lecture, or the next two lectures actually, which are going to contain even more stuff, but that's the nature of the language. Anyway, I have one more bonus material today. Because we had the adjective malign, I thought that we would look at some poetry to end this lecture. So this is not anything that you're expected to know yet. This is a bit too difficult actually for you at the moment, but this is a piece of poetry by Alcaios, who was contemporary with Sappho, of course. They both came from Lesbos. And this is probably the most famous of his fragments, the so-called Ship of State fragment. And this contains, of course, a lot of words that we haven't encountered yet, and also some person endings in verbs which we haven't encountered. Aeolic, this is written in Aeolic Greek, so it's a Western Greek dialect. We are dealing only with Attic Greek on this course. But there are, of course, things that we can recognize here. So for instance, we can recognize this tone. Of course, this is an definite article, and other definite articles as well, and some verb endings as well, like this etai. So I was just looking at this fragment today because I remembered that it had this adjective melaina, which here was also in the Western Greek mode. So it has this ending I. Actually, this ending would be in Attic Greek melaine, and then this final iota would be written as an iota subscript. So this is an dative singular feminine, and this nai, which means ship, also in the dative singular, is would be also ne in the Attic dialect. So it would be ne melaine. This is probably the most beautiful piece of poetry that has been preserved from the Greek archaic age. I am uncomprehending of the uprising of the winds. One wave tosses us in one direction, the other in another, and we are in the middle, carried by a black ship. Actually, this "and we are in the middle" is not a literal translation. Literally, it would be the middle is us. So to meson is the middle. To meson, and then we have this on. This is an participle of Amy. So this is neuter singular nominative participle in the present active of Amy. So it's used here as a predicate, actually. To meson on, the middle is ammes. And this is, ammes is the Iolic form of hemeis, which is this first person plural personal pronoun. So we, ammes. All right, that's all for today.